The hotel bar buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses, but my daughter-in-law Lauren's voice cut through it all like a knife. She was holding court at our corner table, gesturing dramatically as she told her friends about her latest real estate deal, completely talking over me like I wasn't even sitting there. So, I told the seller, "Listen, honey, this market doesn't wait for anyone," Lauren announced, her perfectly manicured hands dancing through the air. "You either take my offer or watch your property value tank when the new development goes up." I tried to interject with a comment about the neighborhood's history. I'd worked as a hotel engineer in this area for 30 years before retiring, but Lauren steamrolled right over me. "Frank, could you grab us some more napkins from the bar?" she said, without even looking at me. "The cocktail ones, not those cheap paper things." Her friends giggled as she added, "You know how old-timers get confused about these things." My face burned with embarrassment, but I stood up anyway. At 62, I'd learned to pick my battles, especially when it came to Lauren. My son Miles sat beside her, scrolling through his phone and pretending not to notice the constant stream of little humiliations his wife directed my way. As I approached the bar, the young bartender, his name tag read Ravi, caught my eye. He was maybe 27, with kind eyes and an easy smile that had made me feel welcome when we'd first arrived. "Another round for the table?" he asked quietly. "Just napkins," I said, my voice probably betraying more frustration than I intended. Ravi nodded and reached under the bar. When he handed me the napkins, he also slipped me my cigarette pack, which was strange because I hadn't given it to him. I was about to say something when I felt the crinkle of paper inside the cellophane wrapper. I glanced back at our table, where Lauren was now regaling her audience with a story about dealing with difficult tenants. The way she emphasized certain words made it clear she wasn't just talking about her rental properties. In the men's room, I carefully extracted a small piece of paper from my cigarette pack. In neat handwriting, it read, "Leave through the service door. Trust me." My hands trembled slightly as I stared at the note. What could Ravi possibly know that I didn't? And why the urgency? When I returned to the table, Lauren barely acknowledged the napkins. She was too busy explaining to her friend Serena how she'd streamlined her family's living arrangements. "Sometimes you have to make tough decisions for everyone's benefit," she said, shooting a meaningful glance in my direction. "Not everyone can see the bigger picture." The tension in my chest tightened. I caught Ravi's eye across the room, and he gave me an almost imperceptible nod toward the back of the restaurant. Something in his expression, a mixture of concern and urgency, convinced me to trust his warning. "I think I'll step outside for some air," I announced, standing up. Lauren waved dismissively. "Don't wander too far, Frank. We might need you to drive Miles home if he has another drink." I made my way toward the back of the restaurant, following the signs toward the restrooms, but continuing past them to a door marked "Staff Only." My heart pounded as I pushed it open, half expecting an alarm to sound. The service corridor was dimly lit and smelled of industrial cleaning supplies. As I walked toward what I hoped was an exit, I could hear voices carrying through the thin walls. Lauren's voice, specifically, though now it sounded different, sharper, more calculating. "The old man has no idea what's coming," she was saying. "By next week, I'll have everything I need to move forward with the plan." "Are you sure this will work?" That was Serena's voice, sounding nervous. "Trust me, I've done my research. Once the HOA board votes, he'll be out of options. The apartment will finally be under proper management, meaning mine." A sudden chill ran through me. What apartment? What HOA board? I pressed closer to the wall, straining to hear more. "What if he fights it?" another voice asked, one of Lauren's other friends. Lauren laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "With what? He's just a lonely old man who doesn't understand how the modern world works. Besides, Miles will back whatever I decide. He always does." I found the service exit and stumbled outside into the cool evening air. The loading dock area was empty except for a few delivery trucks. My mind raced as I tried to process what I'd just overheard. What plan? What apartment? The walk home to my modest one-bedroom apartment took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every step was accompanied by Lauren's words echoing in my head. The old man has no idea what's coming. Once inside, I poured myself a scotch with shaking hands and tried to think rationally. Lauren had always been controlling, but this sounded like something more serious. I pulled out my phone and found a group text message that had been sent while I was walking home. The message was from Lauren, with a photo from tonight's dinner. It showed her, Miles, Serena, and the others laughing and raising their glasses in a toast. I stared at the image for a long moment before realizing what was wrong with it. I'd been sitting right next to Miles when the photo was taken, but I'd been completely cropped out. The caption read, "Amazing night with my favorite people. Here's to new beginnings and clearing out the old to make room for the new." I set the phone down and walked to my small living room, where framed photos of my late wife Margaret lined the mantelpiece. In the pictures, our family looked happy. Miles as a young boy, graduation photos, holiday gatherings. When had everything changed? When had I become someone to be cleared out? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Ravi from the hotel. Be careful. You weren't meant to see tonight. We should talk." I stared at the message for several minutes before responding. "How did you get my number?" "Your son gave it to me last week when he was making a reservation. Said to call if there were any problems with the elderly gentleman. I think there might be." The implication hit me like a punch to the gut. Miles had anticipated problems with me? Had he and Lauren been planning this for weeks? I called my old friend Carmen Ruiz, who worked in HR at the hotel where I used to do contract engineering work. If anyone could help me understand what was happening, it would be her. "Frank? It's late. Is everything okay?" Carmen's voice was thick with sleep. "I need to ask you about property law and HOA regulations. Hypothetically speaking." There was a pause. "This isn't hypothetical, is it? What's going on?" I told her about the evening, about Lauren's overheard conversation, about the strange warning from the bartender. Carmen listened without interrupting. "Frank," she said finally, "you need to check your mail. Look for anything from a homeowners association or building management company, and check your bank statements. Any automatic payments you don't remember authorizing." "Why would... Just do it. And Frank, don't sign anything Lauren gives you, not until we figure out what's going on." After hanging up, I spent the next hour going through a shoebox of mail I'd been meaning to sort. Buried beneath utility bills and advertisements, I found it, a notice from the Riverside Gardens Homeowners Association about a special board meeting scheduled for next week. The subject line read, "Emergency vote, property access, and primary occupant status review." I'd never heard of Riverside Gardens HOA. My apartment building was managed by a simple property management company, not an HOA. So why was I receiving their mail? At the bottom of the notice, in small print, I saw my apartment number and address listed under Properties Under Review. Someone had submitted a formal complaint about elderly safety risks and inappropriate primary occupant designation. The complaint was signed by Lauren DeVere. My hands shook as I reached for my phone to call Carmen back, but it was nearly midnight. Instead, I sat in my armchair, staring at the HOA notice and trying to piece together Lauren's plan. If she somehow managed to get me removed as the primary occupant of my own apartment, the apartment I'd lived in for 8 years, the apartment I paid rent on every month, what would happen to me? Where would I go? I thought about Lucas, my 10-year-old grandson, and how he always seemed to notice when the adults around him were being cruel. Last week, he'd asked me why I looked sad all the time. I'd told him I was just tired, but maybe he'd seen something I'd been too proud to admit. Lauren wasn't just humiliating me for sport. She was systematically working to remove me from my home, my family, my life. And Miles, my own son, was apparently complicit in the plan. But Ravi's warning had given me something Lauren didn't expect. Time. Time to figure out what she was really doing, and time to stop her. I made a mental note to call Carmen first thing in the morning. If Lauren thought she could steamroll over me like she did in conversation, she was about to learn that underestimating someone can be a very dangerous mistake. The next morning, I drove to Miles and Lauren's townhouse to drop off groceries, a weekly routine that Lauren had established to help out, though it felt more like unpaid labor. The house was a showcase of Lauren's taste, all white furniture, expensive art, and not a single family photo that included me. "Frank, perfect timing," Lauren called from the kitchen as I carried in the bags. "The toilet in the guest bathroom is running again. Could you take a look?" It wasn't a request. Lauren had a way of phrasing demands as favors that made it impossible to refuse without seeming unreasonable. "Of course," I said, setting the groceries on the marble counter. As I headed toward the bathroom, I could hear Lauren talking to someone in the living room, another one of her influencer friends, based on the conversation about content creation and building my brand. "Frank keeps this place running," Lauren said loudly enough for me to hear. "It's amazing how handy these older guys can be, like having a live-in maintenance man, but free." Her friend laughed. "That's so smart. I wish I had someone like that." I knelt beside the toilet, adjusting the chain in the tank while trying to ignore the sting of being discussed like hired help. Through the thin walls, I could hear Lauren's voice drop to a more confidential tone. "Actually, we're making some changes soon. The current arrangement isn't really working long-term." "Oh? What kind of changes?" "Let's just say we're creating more space for our growing family." I froze. Growing family? Lauren and Miles had never mentioned having another child. What kind of space was she talking about? The toilet fixed, I returned to the kitchen to find Miles setting up a ring light and camera equipment. "Hey, Dad, could you maybe stay in the back rooms for a bit? Lauren's filming some content for her real estate channel." "Of course," I said, though something in his tone made it clear this wasn't really a request either. I retreated to the small den off the kitchen, where Lucas was playing with his tablet. He looked up when I entered, his face brightening. "Grandpa, want to see my new game?" "Sure, buddy." As Lucas showed me his tablet game, he glanced toward the kitchen and lowered his voice. "Grandpa, why do you always stand in the kitchen looking worried?" The question caught me off guard. "Do I do that?" "Yeah. And Mom talks about you different when you're not around." "Different how?" Lucas shrugged, the way kids do when they sense adult complications they can't quite articulate. "Just different. Like when she talks about the old couch we got rid of." Before I could ask what he meant, Lauren's voice carried from the kitchen. "So the key to successful property management is knowing when to make tough decisions. Sometimes you have to remove elements that are holding back the overall value." I caught Lucas watching me carefully, as if he understood more than a 10-year-old should. After Lauren finished filming, she called me back to the kitchen. "Frank, I need you to sign this for our insurance," she said, sliding a document across the counter. "Just a formality, but they need all residents to acknowledge the policy changes." I picked up the paper, but Lauren immediately launched into a story about a difficult client, making it hard to focus on the document. The header read something about temporary occupancy waiver and primary resident status transfer, but Lauren's chatter made it impossible to read carefully. "Just sign at the bottom," she said, pointing to a highlighted line. "Miles already signed his copy." Something in Carmen's warning echoed in my head. "Don't sign anything Lauren gives you." "Can I take this home to read it over?" I asked. Lauren's smile flickered for just a moment. "It's really just a formality, Frank. The insurance company needs it back today." "Then I'll read it now," I said, moving to a quieter corner. "Oh, don't worry about all that legal language," Lauren said, following me. "You know how these insurance companies are. They make everything sound more complicated than it is." But I was already scanning the document, and what I saw made my pulse surge. This wasn't an insurance form. It was a legal document transferring my status as primary occupant of my apartment to Lauren DeVere, effective immediately upon signing. "Lauren, this isn't an insurance form." "Well, it's insurance-related," she said, her voice taking on an edge. "Look, Frank, I'm trying to help streamline things for everyone. You're getting older, and managing property can be stressful." "I'm not signing this." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Miles looked up from his camera equipment, sensing the tension. "Dad, what's the problem?" "The problem is that your wife is trying to trick me into signing over my apartment." Lauren's mask of sweet concern finally slipped. "Trick you? Frank, I'm trying to help you. You're 62 years old, living alone in a one-bedroom apartment, struggling to keep up with bills." "I'm not struggling with anything." "Really? Because I've seen your bank statements. Miles showed me." I turned to my son, feeling like I'd been slapped. "You showed her my bank statements?" Miles had the grace to look embarrassed. "She was just trying to help, Dad. We're worried about you." "Worried about what, exactly?" Lauren stepped forward, her real personality finally showing. "Worried that you're becoming a burden. Worried that you're too proud to admit you need help. Worried that you're going to end up homeless because you can't face reality." "Lauren," Miles said quietly, but she ignored him. "I'm offering you a solution, Frank. I take over the property management, you don't have to worry about rent or maintenance or any of that stress, and you can focus on enjoying your retirement." "And where exactly would I live while you're managing my apartment?" "We'll figure something out. There are some lovely senior communities." I set the unsigned document on the counter and headed for the door. "I'll see you later, Miles. Lucas, be good for your parents." "Frank, wait," Lauren called, but I was already outside. The next day, I picked up Lucas from school, another of my regular responsibilities that Lauren had gradually assigned to me. As we walked to my car, his teacher, Mrs. Patterson, approached us. "Mr. DeVere, could I speak with you for a moment?" I told Lucas to wait by the car and walked back to Mrs. Patterson. "I hope I'm not overstepping," she said, "but Lucas has seemed quite sad lately. He's mentioned some changes happening at home, and I wanted to make sure everything was okay." "What kind of changes?" "He said his mom told him that Grandpa might be moving far away soon. He's been worried about it." My heart sank. Lauren was already preparing Lucas for my disappearance from his life. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "I'll talk to him." That evening, I returned to the hotel bar where this had all started. Ravi was working again, and he nodded when he saw me approach. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "Not great. You said we should talk?" Ravi glanced around the bar, then leaned closer. "Your daughter-in-law came in here yesterday, talking to the manager about security issues with older guests. She mentioned you specifically, said you'd been acting confused and disoriented." "That's not true." "I know. I've served you before and you're sharper than most people half your age. But she's building a case, Mr. DeVere. She's creating a paper trail that makes you look incompetent." I thought about the HOA notice, the insurance document that wasn't really insurance, Lauren's comments about my bank statements. "Why are you helping me?" Ravi shrugged. "I'm a part-time law student. I've seen this kind of elder manipulation before. It's not right." "What would you do if you were in my position?" "I'd document everything, get proof of what she's really doing, and I'd find out exactly what legal standing she thinks she has." I called Carmen as soon as I got home. "I was hoping you'd call," she said. "I did some digging into that HOA notice you mentioned. Riverside Gardens HOA was incorporated 3 months ago. Guess who's listed as the founding president? Lauren. Bingo. And guess which property was the first one added to their jurisdiction? My apartment building. She's been planning this for months, Frank. She somehow got your building reclassified under HOA management, then filed complaints against you as a resident. It's actually pretty sophisticated. Is it legal? That's the million-dollar question. I think she's exploiting some loopholes in property management law, but I'd need to see all the paperwork to be sure. How do I get that paperwork? Leave that to me. I still have friends in the right places. Over the next few days, I began paying closer attention to everything Lauren said and did. I started carrying a small notebook, recording dates and times of our interactions. I saved every text message, every email, every document she tried to get me to sign. Miles called me twice, asking me to stop making things difficult and to trust that Lauren knows what she's doing. Each conversation made it clearer that my son had chosen his wife's side in whatever battle was coming. But it was Lucas who provided the most heartbreaking confirmation of Lauren's plan. During one of our school pickups, he asked me directly, "Grandpa, are you really moving away?" "Why would you think that?" "Mom said after the meeting next week you'd probably have to live somewhere else. She said it would be better for everyone." I knelt down to his level. "Lucas, do you want me to move away?" His eyes filled with tears. "No, but Mom says sometimes adults have to make hard choices." "She's right about that," I said. "Sometimes they do." That night, Carmen called with news. "I got the paperwork," she said. "Frank, this is worse than we thought. She's not just trying to take over your apartment. She's trying to have you declared mentally incompetent." "What?" "The HOA complaint includes statements from Miles about your declining cognitive function and your inability to manage financial responsibilities. She's building a case for guardianship." The room spun around me. Guardianship would mean Lauren could control every aspect of my life, where I lived, how I spent my money, who I could see. Can she do that? Not without a court order, but if she can convince a judge that you're incompetent and that your family is concerned about your welfare, she might have a chance. What do I need to prove she's lying? Everything. Bank statements showing you pay your bills on time, medical records showing you're in good health, character witnesses who can testify to your mental acuity, and most importantly, proof that her complaints are fabricated. How do I get that? We start with the HOA meeting. If she's as arrogant as you say, she might reveal more than she intends to. The next morning, I visited the building association office in person. Greta Malm, the association president, was a stern woman in her 50s who seemed perpetually annoyed by having to deal with residents. "Mr. DeVere," she said when I introduced myself. "Yes, I've been expecting you might stop by. I received a notice about a vote regarding my apartment. I'm not sure I understand what's happening." Greta shuffled through some papers on her desk. "It appears there's been a complaint filed about your occupancy status. The HOA board needs to review the situation." "What HOA board? My building has never been part of an HOA." "Well, it is now. Property management transitions happen all the time. I'm sure it's just a formality." But something in her tone suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with the situation either. "Can you tell me who filed the complaint?" "That information is confidential until the hearing." "Is there anything I can do to prepare for this hearing?" Greta glanced around the office, then lowered her voice. "Between you and me, Mr. DeVere, I'd recommend bringing documentation of your rental history, payment records, that sort of thing. Sometimes these complaints are overstated." After leaving the association office, I met Carmen at her HR office. She'd been busy gathering information about Lauren's new HOA and the legal maneuvers involved. "I found something interesting," Carmen said, spreading documents across her desk. "The complaint against you mentions several specific incidents, times when you allegedly acted confused or made inappropriate comments. But I cross-referenced the dates with hotel security footage." "Hotel security footage? You've been coming to our hotel bar for months, Frank. We have cameras. And on the dates, Lauren claims you were acting erratically in public. Our footage shows you behaving completely normally." So she's lying about the incidents. Not just lying, she's created detailed false reports. This isn't just manipulation, Frank. This is fraud. I spent the afternoon at the public library researching property law and guardianship procedures. What I learned was terrifying. If Lauren could convince a judge that I was mentally incompetent, she could gain control of not just my apartment, but my entire life savings, my medical decisions, even my ability to see Lucas. But I also learned something else. The burden of proof was on her. She would need to demonstrate clear evidence of my incompetence, and any evidence of fraud or manipulation on her part would destroy her case. As I walked home from the library, my phone rang. It was Ravi. "Mr. DeVere, I think you should know. Your daughter-in-law was here again today. She was asking our manager about getting written statements regarding your behavior." "What did the manager say?" "He told her he'd need to review the security footage first. She didn't seem happy about that." "Ravi, would you be willing to provide a written statement about what you've observed, about Lauren's behavior, not mine?" "Absolutely. I've been keeping notes ever since that first night." The pieces of my counterattack were starting to come together. Lauren had been so focused on building her case against me that she hadn't considered how her own behavior might look under scrutiny. That evening, I sat down and wrote out a timeline of everything that had happened over the past few months. Lauren's gradual escalation of control, her attempts to get me to sign documents, her comments about clearing out the old, her manipulation of Miles and Lucas. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than fear and confusion. I felt angry, and anger, I was beginning to realize, could be a very useful emotion when channeled properly. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday evening. I had 3 days to gather evidence, secure witnesses, and prepare to fight for my life. Literally. Lauren had made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed that being older meant being powerless. She was about to learn how wrong she was. On Thursday morning, I met with Greta Malm in her small garden behind the association office. She'd agreed to speak with me privately after I'd mentioned some concerns about the legitimacy of the complaint process. "Mrs. Malm, I need to ask you directly. Has anyone pressured you to expedite this vote?" Greta looked uncomfortable. "Mr. DeVere, I shouldn't be discussing this with you. I'm not asking you to violate any rules. I'm asking if you feel confident that proper procedures have been followed." She was quiet for a long moment, deadheading roses with more force than necessary. "Your daughter-in-law is very persistent," she finally said. "She's called me several times asking about fast-tracking the vote. She seemed to know quite a bit about HOA procedures for someone who just joined." "What kind of things did she know?" "Specific timelines, required documentation, voting thresholds. It was almost like she'd researched exactly how to expedite a complaint." After leaving Greta's garden, I drove to Jonas Feld's office. As the HOA accountant, he would have records of any financial irregularities that might support Lauren's claims about my incompetence. Jonas was a methodical man in his late 40s who spoke in precise, careful sentences. "Mr. DeVere, I can share general information about your account status, but detailed financial records would require—" "I'm not asking for details. I'm asking if there are any irregularities that would support claims of financial mismanagement." Jonas pulled up my file on his computer, frowning as he scrolled through the records. "This is odd," he said. "There are several large withdrawals from your account over the past 2 months. Did you authorize cash withdrawals of $500 each on these dates?" He showed me a printout with dates and amounts. I didn't recognize any of the transactions. I never withdrew that money. The withdrawals were made using a power of attorney authorization. Do you recall signing a power of attorney? My stomach dropped. No, I never signed anything like that. Well, we have documentation on file. Let me pull the paperwork. Jonas disappeared into a filing cabinet and returned with a folder. Inside was a power of attorney document with my signature. except it wasn't my signature. It was close, but the handwriting was slightly different, more feminine. Mr. Feld, this signature is forged. Jonas compared the signature to other documents in my file. You may be right. The writing style is inconsistent with your other signatures. Who submitted this power of attorney? According to the file, it was submitted by Lauren DeVere, acting on behalf of Family Financial Management. I asked Jonas for copies of all the financial records, including the forged power of attorney. If Lauren was stealing money from my account to create evidence of financial irresponsibility, she'd just handed me proof of her fraud. My next stop was the hotel, where I met with Sylvia Nguyen, the night manager who had access to security footage. Carmen had arranged the meeting, explaining that we needed to verify the timeline of Lauren's claims. Sylvia was a serious young woman who took her responsibilities seriously. I pulled the footage from the dates in question, she said, leading me to a small office behind the front desk. Your daughter-in-law claimed you were acting disoriented and inappropriate on these specific evenings. She showed me video footage from the hotel's main lobby and bar area. On every date Lauren had cited in her complaint, the footage showed me behaving normally, sitting quietly, ordering drinks politely, paying my bill and leaving without incident. On this date, Sylvia said, pointing to one screen, she claimed you were loud and belligerent, but as you can see, you barely spoke to anyone. Would you be willing to provide copies of this footage? For legal proceedings? Absolutely. What your daughter-in-law is doing is wrong. But Sylvia had more information. There's something else you should know. Last week, your daughter-in-law came in with a friend and staged what looked like an incident near the bar. They were talking loudly about how someone, they didn't mention names, but the timing suggests they meant you, had been bothering other guests. Staged how? Her friend pretended to be upset, claiming an older man had made inappropriate comments. But I checked our footage. You weren't even here that night. They were creating a false incident report. Do you have footage of them staging this? I do, and I have the false incident report they tried to file with our security office. By Thursday evening, I had assembled a comprehensive file of evidence. Bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals made with a forged power of attorney, security footage disproving Lauren's claims about my behavior, witness statements from Ravi and Sylvia about Lauren's deceptive tactics, and documentation showing that she had created the HOA specifically to target my apartment. Carmen helped me organize everything into a presentation for the board meeting. Frank, this is ironclad, she said, as we reviewed the evidence. She's not just manipulating you. She's committed multiple felonies: forgery, fraud, theft, filing false reports. Will it be enough to stop the vote? It'll be enough to destroy her completely. That night, I called Lucas to say goodnight, a routine Lauren had recently tried to discourage. Grandpa, are you going to the meeting tomorrow? Yes, I am. Mom said you probably wouldn't come. She said you don't like confrontation. I thought about that. Lauren was right. I didn't like confrontation. I'd spent my whole life avoiding conflict, keeping my head down, trying not to make waves. But sometimes, confrontation is the only way to protect what matters. Lucas, sometimes adults have to stand up for themselves, even when it's scary. Are you scared? A little. But I'm not going to let anyone take me away from you. Friday evening arrived gray and drizzly. The association boardroom was in the basement of a community center, a windowless space with fluorescent lighting and folding chairs arranged in rows. When I arrived at 7 o'clock, the room was already crowded. Lauren sat in the front row, flanked by Miles and several of her friends, including Serena. She wore a navy blue dress that made her look professional and concerned, the perfect outfit for someone trying to help an elderly family member. Greta Malm sat at a table at the front of the room with 2 other board members I didn't recognize. Jonas Feld sat to one side with a stack of financial documents, but I wasn't alone either. Carmen sat in the back row, along with Ravi and Sylvia from the hotel. I'd also spotted Mrs. Patterson, Lucas's teacher, who had come after I'd explained the situation to her. and in the very back, almost hidden behind a pillar, sat Lucas himself. He must have convinced someone to bring him, though I couldn't see who. Greta called the meeting to order and read the complaint against me. As she spoke, Lauren nodded sympathetically, occasionally glancing back at me with what looked like genuine concern for anyone who didn't know better. The complaint alleges that Mr. Franklin DeVere has demonstrated declining cognitive function, financial irresponsibility, and inappropriate social behavior that makes him unsuitable for independent living, Greta read. The complainant requests that the board vote to transfer primary occupant status to a more suitable family member who can ensure proper property management. Lauren stood when invited to present her case. Thank you, Mrs. Malm. This is incredibly difficult for our family, but we're concerned about Frank's welfare and safety. Her voice carried just the right note of reluctant worry. Over the past few months, we've noticed significant changes in his behavior and judgment. She presented a folder of documents, the incident reports from the hotel, bank statements showing irregular spending, testimony from Miles about my confusion and inappropriate comments. We're not trying to punish Frank, Lauren continued. We love him, and we want what's best for him, but he needs more support than he's currently getting, and his current living situation isn't safe for someone in his condition. Miles nodded along, though he couldn't meet my eyes. We're prepared to take full responsibility for his care and his financial management. This isn't about taking anything away from Frank. It's about making sure he gets the help he needs. When Lauren finished, Greta asked if I wanted to respond. I stood up slowly, carrying my own folder of documents. The room was completely quiet. Thank you, Mrs. Malm. I appreciate the opportunity to address these serious allegations. I looked directly at Lauren as I spoke. My daughter-in-law is right about one thing. This situation does involve someone who needs help, but it's not me. I opened my folder and pulled out the bank records Jonas had provided. These are my financial records, which show several large unauthorized withdrawals made using a forged power of attorney. I handed copies to the board members. As you can see, the signature on the power of attorney document doesn't match my actual signature on other legal documents. Lauren's confident expression flickered. The person who forged this document used it to steal money from my account, then used those irregular transactions as evidence of my financial incompetence. That's not cognitive decline. That's fraud. I pulled out the hotel security footage stills. The complaint includes several incident reports claiming I behaved inappropriately at the Riverside Hotel. These are security camera images from those exact dates and times, showing that I was either not present at all or behaving completely normally. Sylvia stood up from the back of the room. I'm the night manager at the Riverside Hotel. I can confirm that these incident reports are false. We have complete video footage disproving every allegation. Lauren was starting to look pale. Furthermore, I continued, we have video evidence of the complainant staging a false incident with an accomplice, then attempting to file a fraudulent report with hotel security. Ravi stood up next. I'm a bartender at the hotel and a law student. I witnessed Mrs. DeVere coaching her friend to make false statements about Mr. DeVere. I have a written statement documenting everything I observed. The room was buzzing now. Lauren looked frantically at Miles, who seemed frozen in his chair. Mrs. Mom, I said, I'd like to know how my apartment building became part of this HOA. I never received notice of any management transition. Greta looked uncomfortable. The transition was expedited at the request of the complainant. Expedited how? Mrs. DeVere demonstrated extensive knowledge of HOA procedures and convinced us that the situation was urgent. In other words, she researched exactly how to manipulate the system to target my home. I pulled out my final piece of evidence, the timeline Carmen and I had constructed showing Lauren's systematic campaign against me. This isn't about family concern or elder care. This is about a calculated attempt to steal my home and my independence using forged documents, false reports, and manipulation of legal procedures. Lauren finally found her voice. This is ridiculous. Frank, you're being paranoid. We're trying to help you. By stealing my money? By filing false police reports? By creating an HOA specifically to evict me from my own apartment? You never what? Never forged my signature? Never staged incidents at the hotel? Never told your friends about clearing out the old to make room for your plans? The room erupted in murmurs. Greta banged her gavel for order. Mrs. DeVere, do you have any response to these allegations? Lauren stood up, her composure finally cracking. You don't understand. He's not capable of living alone anymore. He's confused. He can't manage his finances. According to what evidence? I interrupted. The forged documents, the false incident reports, the money you stole from my account. I didn't steal anything. I was trying to protect... Protect what? Your plan to take over my apartment? Your scheme to have me declared incompetent so you could control my life? Miles finally spoke up. Dad, please, let's discuss this privately. No, Miles. This is exactly where it needs to be discussed. In public, in front of witnesses, with documentation and evidence. I turned back to the board. Mrs. Malm, I'm requesting that the board not only dismiss this fraudulent complaint, but also refer this matter to the police for investigation of forgery, fraud, and theft. Greta looked at the other board members, then at the evidence spread across the table. The board will need to review all this documentation, but based on what's been presented tonight, it appears there are serious questions about the validity of the original complaint. Jonas Feld stood up. For the record, the financial irregularities cited in the complaint appear to be the result of unauthorized transactions made with forged documentation. Mr. DeVere's actual financial management has been exemplary. Lauren was now visibly shaking. This is insane. You're all believing his paranoid fantasies. Mrs. DeVere, Greta said firmly, do you have any evidence to refute the documentation Mr. DeVere has presented? This is all taken out of context. What context would justify forging someone's signature to access their bank account? Lauren looked around the room desperately, finally realizing that her carefully constructed plan was collapsing in front of everyone. You don't understand what it's like dealing with him. He's stubborn and difficult and competent, I said quietly, and legally entitled to live in his own apartment without interference from people who want to control his life. The board voted unanimously to dismiss Lauren's complaint and to restore any property management authority she had attempted to claim. They also voted to refer the matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of the forged documents and fraudulent reports. As the meeting broke up, Lauren stormed out without speaking to anyone. Miles lingered, looking like he wanted to say something, but ultimately followed his wife. But Lucas appeared at my side, having somehow navigated through the crowd. Grandpa, does this mean you don't have to move away? That's exactly what it means. Good. I was scared I wouldn't see you anymore. As we walked out of the community center together, Carmen caught up with us. Frank, I'm proud of you. That took real courage. I had good help. What happens now? I thought about that. Lauren's plan had failed completely, but the damage to my relationship with Miles might be permanent. She'd shown her true nature in front of everyone who mattered, and there would be legal consequences for her actions. But more importantly, I'd learned something about myself. For too long, I'd accepted being treated as invisible, as irrelevant, as someone whose opinions and rights didn't matter. I'd confused keeping the peace with preserving my dignity. Now I go home to my apartment, I said, and I live my life on my own terms. 3 weeks later, Lauren was formally charged with fraud and forgery. Miles filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and a desire to protect Lucas from further manipulation. The HOA she'd created was dissolved, and my building returned to its original management company. I still pick Lucas up from school twice a week, and we spend Saturday afternoons together working on his homework or playing games. Miles and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship, though it will take time for me to trust him completely again. Ravi finished his law degree and sent me an invitation to his graduation. Sylvia was promoted to assistant manager at the hotel. Carmen and I have dinner once a week, usually at the hotel bar where this all started. And every time I sit at that bar, I remember the night a young bartender slipped me a warning note and gave me the chance to save my own life. Sometimes the people who help us are the ones we least expect, and sometimes the strength we need to fight back was inside us all along. We just needed someone to remind us it was there.